The bonding hall of Valanthros had never felt so cold. Ivara stood at the edge of the crowd, her fingers trembling against the fabric of her borrowed dress. Hundreds of wolves had gathered beneath the iron chandeliers, their faces illuminated by the glow of 1,000 candles. The scent of pine and winter roses hung thick in the air, mingling with something sharper. Anticipation, hunger. The primal energy of wolves waiting to witness bonds forged or broken. She should not have worn her mother's pendant. The small silver moon rested against her collarbone, drawing attention to the low neckline of a dress she had no business wearing. But Corvain had asked her to look beautiful tonight. He had cupped her face in his hands just yesterday and promised that this ceremony would change everything. Tonight, he had said, "I will claim you before the kingdom. No more hiding. No more whispers. You will be mine, and everyone will know it." She had believed him. 3 years of secret meetings. 3 years of stolen kisses in shadowed corridors and promises whispered against her skin. 3 years of Corvain swearing that her common blood did not matter, that his position as beta to the Alpha King meant nothing compared to what he felt for her. 3 years of lies. Ivara realized it the moment Corvain stepped onto the claiming platform. He did not look for her in the crowd, did not seek her eyes as he always did when they were forced to pretend indifference in public. Instead, his gaze swept past her as if she were invisible, settling on the cluster of noble daughters positioned near the front of the hall. Her heart began to pound. The High Elder raised his hands for silence. The crowd obeyed instantly, hundreds of conversations dying to whispers, then to nothing at all. Even the candle flames seemed to still. Beside the elder stood the Alpha King himself. Ivara had seen Kalen only from a distance before this night. He rarely attended common ceremonies, preferring to leave such matters to his beta while he dealt with threats along the kingdom's borders. But tonight, he stood on the dais in full ceremonial black, his presence radiating an authority that made her wolf want to bare its throat in submission. He was larger than she had realized, taller. His shoulders broad beneath the weight of his rank, his dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from granite and shadow. But it was his eyes that caught her breath and held it captive. Amber, flecked with gold. The eyes of a predator. And they were fixed directly on her. Ivara dropped her gaze, heat flooding her cheeks. Why would the Alpha King look at her? She was nobody. A seamstress's daughter with no pack affiliation and no bloodline worth mentioning. The only reason she stood in this hall at all was because Corvain had promised to change her fate tonight. The High Elder's voice echoed through the chamber. "Corvain, beta of Valanthros, blood of the ancient line of Mordeth. You have requested the right of public claiming. Name the one you choose." The hall held its breath. Ivara's nails dug into her palms. This was it. The moment everything changed. She lifted her chin, prepared to step forward when he spoke her name. Corvain smiled, but not at her. "I claim," he announced, his voice ringing with theatrical pleasure. "Absolutely no one." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Corvain raised his hand for silence, his smile widening into something cruel. "I called this gathering not to claim a mate, but to expose a fraud. There is a woman in this hall who has spent 3 years throwing herself at me, convinced that I would lower myself to bond with common filth." Ivara's blood turned to ice. "She is here tonight," Corvain continued, "wearing a borrowed dress and her dead mother's jewelry, expecting me to claim her before the kingdom." He laughed, and the sound was a knife between her ribs. "As if I would ever taint my bloodline with a packless nobody who spreads her legs for any wolf who shows her attention." The crowd parted around Ivara like water fleeing poison. She stood exposed, alone, every eye in the hall turning to witness her humiliation. "Her name is Ivara," Corvain declared, "and I want every wolf present to see her for what she truly is. A desperate, delusional creature who mistook a beta's passing amusement for genuine affection. Laughter erupted from the noble section. Sharp, vicious laughter that cut through Ivara's chest and shredded what remained of her dignity. She could not breathe, could not move, could only stand frozen as 3 years of love curdled into public spectacle, as the man she had trusted with her heart used it to entertain the court. Corvain stepped down from the platform, approaching her with the lazy confidence of a predator who had already won. "Perhaps," he murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "you could find work in one of the border taverns. I hear they value women with your particular talents." More laughter, more whispers. The walls were closing in. The air was too thick. Her wolf was howling inside her chest, demanding she fight, she flee, she do something other than stand here and accept destruction. Then a voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. "Enough." The single word silenced the hall instantly. Ivara looked up to find the Alpha King descending from the dais, his amber eyes blazing with cold fury. The crowd scrambled to clear his path. Even Corvain stumbled backward, his arrogant smile faltering. Kaelin stopped directly before Ivara. He studied her face for a long moment, the tear tracks on her cheeks, the trembling of her lower lip, the defiance still flickering in her eyes despite everything. Then he turned to face the hall, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I claim this woman as mine." Silence crashed through the bonding hall like a physical force. Ivara heard the words, but her mind refused to process them. The Alpha King, claiming her. It was impossible. It was absurd. Kings did not claim seamstresses' daughters in the middle of another wolf's cruelty. Yet Kaelin stood before her, his massive frame blocking her view of Corvain's stunned face, his declaration still echoing off the ancient stone walls. "My king." The High Elder's voice cracked with shock. "This is highly irregular. The claiming ritual requires preparation, documentation, witnesses of appropriate standing." "You have 500 witnesses," Kaelin replied without turning. "And I am the Alpha King. My word is documentation enough." "But the woman," the elder stammered, "she has no bloodline, no pack, no status whatsoever. The council will never approve." Kaelin finally turned, and the look he gave the elder made the old wolf shrink backward. "The council approves what I tell them to approve. This woman is now under my protection. Anyone who challenges that challenges me directly." His gaze swept across the hall, settling briefly on Corvain with an expression of such contempt that the beta visibly paled. "Does anyone wish to challenge me?" The silence stretched. Not a single wolf moved. Kaelin extended his hand toward Ivara. "Come." She stared at his palm. Large, calloused, steady. The hand of a king offering itself to a nobody. "I do not understand," she whispered, her voice raw from suppressed tears. "Why would you do this?" Something flickered in those amber eyes, something that almost looked like recognition. "Because I do not tolerate cruelty in my kingdom," he said quietly, "and because you deserve better than what was done to you tonight." It was not a declaration of love. It was not even an explanation. But in that moment, standing in the wreckage of her public humiliation, his words felt like the first kindness she had received in years. Ivara placed her trembling hand in his. The instant their skin touched, something ignited. Heat rushed up her arm, flooding through her veins, pooling in her chest like liquid fire. Her wolf, which had been howling in distress moments before, suddenly went still. Not calm. Something deeper. Something ancient stirred in the depths of her being, lifting its head as if waking from a long sleep. Kaelin's hand tightened around hers. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and she realized he had felt it too. "What was that?" she breathed. Before he could answer, Corvain's voice shattered the moment. "You cannot be serious." The beta pushed forward, his handsome face twisted with disbelief. "My king, this woman is nothing. She has no magic, no standing, and no value to the throne." I was merely teaching her a lesson about reaching above her station. Kaelin turned slowly. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. You were teaching her a lesson, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. She needed to understand her place. Corvain spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. You know how these common women are. Give them attention, and they convince themselves they deserve more. I was protecting the dignity of this court by exposing her delusions publicly before she could embarrass herself further. The blow came too fast to follow. One moment Corvain was speaking. The next he was on the floor, blood streaming from his nose, Kaelin standing over him with knuckles that had not even bruised. The dignity of this court, the Alpha King said, is not protected by cruelty to the defenseless. It is protected by honor, by justice, by wolves who understand that power exists to shield the weak, not to destroy them for entertainment. Corvain scrambled backward, his eyes wild with fear and fury. You will regret this, my king. The council will hear of your behavior, claiming a pack less nobody over your own beta. They will question your judgment, your fitness to rule. Let them question. Kaelin pulled Ivara closer to his side, his arm wrapping around her waist with possessive certainty. When they see the woman I have chosen, they will understand. Ivara's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. None of this made sense. The claiming, the strange fire that had passed between them, the way Kaelin held her as if she were something precious rather than a pawn in political maneuvering. The Alpha King turned to address the hall one final time. Let it be known throughout Velanthros that this woman, Ivara, is under my protection. Any hand raised against her is a hand raised against the crown. Any tongue that speaks ill of her speaks treason. His gaze found Corvain still crumpled on the floor. That includes you, Beta. Remember your place. He led her from the hall without looking back. The corridors of the castle blurred past Ivara in a haze of shock and candlelight. Servants pressed themselves against walls as the Alpha King strode past, his grip on her hand never loosening. Finally, he stopped before a door of carved oak. His personal study, she realized, recognizing the royal crest burned into the wood. Inside, he released her hand and moved to pour wine from a crystal decanter. Ivara stood frozen near the doorway, suddenly aware of how alone they were. You are safe here, Kaelin said without turning. I have not brought you here to take advantage. Then why have you brought me here at all? Her voice came out stronger than she expected. Why claim me? You do not know me. You have never spoken to me before tonight. None of this makes any sense. Kaelin turned, and in the privacy of his study, she saw something in his expression that had been masked in public. Weariness. And beneath it, a loneliness that echoed her own. When I touched your hand in that hall, he said slowly, something happened. You felt it too. I saw it in your eyes. Ivara's pulse stuttered. The fire. The way her wolf had recognized something. What was it? She asked. Kaelin set down his wine without drinking. I do not know yet, but I intend to find out. In the meantime, you will remain in the castle under my protection. You will be given chambers befitting your new status. You will want for nothing. And if I refuse? A hint of a smile touched his stern mouth. Then I will spend every day convincing you otherwise. But you should know, Ivara, that I do not believe in coincidence. You were in that hall tonight for a reason. What happened between us happened for a reason. He crossed to her, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I have waited 32 years to feel what I felt when our hands touched. He said quietly, I am not letting you walk away until we both understand what it means. Before she could respond, a knock thundered against the door. My king. The voice belonged to Rorvik, the king's chief advisor. Urgent news from the border. And the council has called an emergency session regarding your claiming. Kaelin's jaw tightened. It begins. He looked down at Ivara with something almost like regret. Rest tonight. I will send guards to your door. Tomorrow, we will face whatever comes together. He was gone before she could ask what he meant by together. But as the door closed behind him, Ivara pressed her hand to her chest, where the strange fire still smoldered. And her wolf, that wild creature she had spent her whole life suppressing, whispered a word she did not understand. Mate. The chambers Ivara was given had once belonged to a queen. She learned this from the servant who arrived with her evening meal, a young woman with nervous eyes who could not stop staring at Ivara as if she expected her to transform into something monstrous. These were Queen Astrith's rooms, the servant whispered. Before she died in the winter plague 15 years ago. No one has slept here since. Ivara thanked her and ate alone, surrounded by luxury that felt like a beautiful cage. The bed was vast enough for 6 people. The windows overlooked the moonlit forest that stretched to the mountains beyond. Every surface gleamed with gold and velvet, and things she could never have afforded in a lifetime of seamstress work. But none of it changed what she was. A packless nobody who had somehow become the center of a political storm. Sleep refused to come. Ivara paced the chambers as the moon climbed higher, replaying every moment of the evening, Corvain's cruelty, the laughter of the nobles, and then Kaelin, descending from the dais like a dark god delivering judgment. Why had he done it? The explanation he had given made little sense. Feeling something when they touched was not a reason to upend the politics of a kingdom. Men like Kaelin did not sacrifice their standing for women like her, unless there was something he was not telling her. The mark on her left hip began to tingle. Ivara froze. She had been born with the mark, a pale crescent moon that her mother had always covered with specially sewn undergarments, warning her never to let anyone see it. It means something, her mother had said. Something dangerous. Promise me you will keep it hidden. She had kept that promise for 23 years. But now, for the first time in her life, the mark was warm, pulsing gently, as if responding to something, or someone. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Ivara crossed to the door, expecting another servant. Instead, she found Rorvik, the king's advisor, his weathered face grim in the corridor torchlight. "My lady, we must move quickly." The advisor's voice was barely above a whisper. "The council has ruled against the claiming. They are sending guards to remove you from the castle within the hour." "Remove me?" Ivara's blood chilled. "But the king said I was under his protection. The king is currently surrounded by his council, being informed that his judgment has been compromised." Rorvik glanced down the corridor. "They are calling it moon madness, claiming that you used some form of enchantment to manipulate him. By morning, they will have you imprisoned, or worse. I have done nothing wrong. That matters very little when powerful wolves decide you are a threat." Rorvik pressed a heavy cloak into her hands. "I have served 3 generations of kings. I know the difference between enchantment and a genuine bond awakening. What happened between you and Kaelin was real, which is precisely why certain members of the court want you eliminated before it can strengthen." Ivara's hands shook as she clutched the cloak. Who? Who wants this? Several names. But leading them all? Rorvik's expression darkened. Corvain. He went straight from the bonding hall to the council chambers. He has convinced them that you are a danger to the throne. Of course he did. The man who had spent 3 years using her was now ensuring her destruction, rather than face the humiliation of being struck down by his king. Where is Kaelin? Why is he not stopping this? He does not know the full extent of what they are planning. Rorvik took her arm and began guiding her toward a servant's passage. By the time he realizes, it will be too late. "I am acting on my own authority to get you out of the castle. There is a village called Brindale, 3 days' ride to the east. You will be safe there until the king can regain control. But if I run, I look guilty. If you stay, you die." Rorvik stopped at a narrow door hidden behind a tapestry. The council has already signed the order, my lady. You have been declared a threat to the realm. Execution at dawn. The word hit her like a physical blow. Execution. This is madness, she breathed. I am a seamstress. I mend torn dresses and embroider pillow covers. How can I possibly threaten an entire kingdom? Something in Rorvik's eyes shifted. Something that looked almost like knowledge he was forbidden to share. Perhaps, he said carefully, you are more than you have been led to believe. Your mother made me swear to protect you if this day ever came. I intend to keep that promise. You knew my mother? Before Rorvik could answer, the sound of marching boots echoed from the main corridor. No more time. He thrust open the hidden door. The passage leads to the stables. Take the gray mare in the far stall. Ride east without stopping. Trust no one until you reach Brindale. Find the healer woman called Dorwin. She will shelter you. Ivara hesitated at the threshold, her heart screaming at her to stay, to fight, to find Kaelin and demand answers. But the boots were getting closer, and the memory of Corvain's cruel smile reminded her what happened to powerless women who stood their ground against powerful men. Tell him, she said fiercely. Tell the king that I did not run because I am guilty. I ran because I was given no choice. Rorvik nodded. I will tell him. Now go. Ivara plunged into darkness. The passage twisted through the bowels of the castle, damp stone pressing close on either side. She ran with one hand trailing the wall, her borrowed cloak snagging on rough edges, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, distant but growing closer, she heard wolves beginning to howl. The hunt had begun. She burst from the passage into the cold night air of the stables. The gray mare was where Rorvik had promised, already saddled, already stamping with nervous energy. Ivara mounted with clumsy desperation, her hands tangling in the reins. As she kicked the horse into motion, a roar of fury split the night. She looked back to see a figure standing in the highest tower of the castle, silhouetted against the moon. Even from this distance, she recognized the massive shoulders, the commanding stance. Kaelin. He had discovered her disappearance. His howl chased her into the forest, a sound of such anguish that it made her mare stumble. It was not the howl of a king hunting an escaped prisoner. It was the howl of a wolf whose mate had been torn away. Ivara rode into the darkness with tears streaming down her face and the mark on her hip burning like a brand. Behind her, Valanthros erupted into chaos, and she did not know if she would ever see Kaelin again. 2 months had passed since Ivara fled Valanthros. The village of Brindale clung to the eastern slopes of the Thornmere Mountains like a stubborn vine refusing to release its grip on stone. It was a place forgotten by maps and ignored by kings, populated by humans and wolfless outcasts who wanted nothing to do with pack politics. It was perfect. Ivara had arrived half dead from exhaustion, her mare lathered and stumbling. Dorwin, the healer woman Rorvik had mentioned, had taken one look at her and asked no questions. She had simply pulled Ivara into her cottage, fed her broth, and given her a bed by the fire. That had been 63 days ago. Now Ivara was known as Mira, a young widow from the western provinces seeking refuge from grief. She assisted Dorwin with her healing work, grinding herbs and mixing poultices, learning the old woman's craft with desperate focus. Anything to keep her mind from wandering back to a moonlit hall and amber eyes that had looked at her like she mattered. The mark on her hip had never stopped burning. Some nights it was a gentle warmth, almost comforting. Other nights it flared with such intensity that she had to bite her pillow to keep from crying out. Dorwin had noticed her discomfort but had not pressed for explanations. Until now. You carry more than grief, child. The old healer's voice was soft as she watched Ivara struggle to lift a basket of dried lavender. Your body is changing. Have you not noticed? Ivara set down the basket with trembling hands. I do not know what you mean. Dorwin's weathered face creased with knowing sympathy. When did you last bleed? The question struck like lightning. Ivara counted backward, her mind racing through the chaos of her flight and the weeks that followed. She had attributed the missed cycles to stress, to fear, to the upheaval of everything she had known. But now, standing in the afternoon light of Dorwin's cottage, she pressed her hand to her belly and felt what she had been refusing to acknowledge. A flutter. Faint, but unmistakable. Life stirring beneath her palm. "No," she whispered. "That is impossible. We never. Corvain and I, we were careful. We never completed the bond." Dorwin's eyes sharpened. Corvain? The name had slipped out before Ivara could stop it. She had been so careful to maintain her false identity, to speak nothing of her past, to pretend she was merely another broken woman seeking peace. But secrets had a way of surfacing. Ivara sank onto a wooden stool, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "There was a man. Before I came here. He was cruel to me in the end, but for years I believed he loved me. We were intimate, many times, but I took precautions. I drank the tea that prevents conception." Dorwin studied her for a long moment. And was there another man? After him? The memory of Kaelin's hand closing around hers surged through Ivara's mind, the fire that had ignited between them. The way her wolf had whispered that forbidden word. Mate. "We only touched hands," Ivara said. "Nothing more. It is not possible for me to carry his child." Yet the flutter came again, stronger this time. And with it, a pulse of warmth from the mark on her hip that seemed to answer an unspoken question. Dorwin rose and crossed to a locked cabinet in the corner of the cottage. She withdrew a small leather pouch and returned to kneel before Ivara. "Show me your mark," the healer said quietly. Ivara's blood chilled. "How do you know about the mark?" "Because I knew your mother." Dorwin's eyes held decades of secrets. "Because I was there the night you were born, when the crescent moon appeared on your skin, and we all understood what it meant. Show me, child, please." With shaking fingers, Ivara lifted her skirt to reveal the mark on her left hip. The pale crescent that had been with her since birth. Only it was no longer pale. The mark had darkened to deep silver, and within its curve, a second shape was forming. A wolf's head, emerging from the moon like a creature being born from shadow. Dorwin drew a sharp breath. "It has begun." "What has begun?" Ivara demanded. "What is happening to me?" Before the healer could answer, a wave of dizziness crashed through Ivara's body. She gasped, clutching her belly as the flutter intensified into movement. Distinct movement. From two different places at once. "Twins," she breathed. "I am carrying twins." "You are carrying heirs," Dorwin corrected. "Heirs to a bloodline that has not produced true mated offspring in 5 generations. The old woman's voice trembled with something between awe and fear. "You are carrying the children of the Alpha King, but we never lay together. The bond does not require physical union to create life." Dorwin gripped Ivara's hands tightly. When two souls recognize each other as true mates, when the bond ignites at first touch, conception can occur through that connection alone. It is rare, it is ancient, and it is the reason certain wolves will stop at nothing to see you dead. The world tilted around Ivara. She was pregnant with Kaelin's children, a man she had touched only once, a king she had fled in the night. And somewhere out there, enemies were hunting her. Her hand moved protectively to her belly. The twins stirred in response, as if they could sense their mother's fear. "What do I do?" she whispered. Dorwin's expression hardened with determination. "First, you survive. Then, when the time is right, you fight." The trader arrived in Brindale on a morning thick with fog. Ivara watched from Dorwin's window as the weathered wagon rolled into the village square, drawn by 2 exhausted horses and laden with goods from the western provinces. Traders were rare in Brindale. The mountain paths were treacherous, and most merchants considered the remote village unworthy of the journey. But this trader had made the trek, and by noon, the entire village had gathered to hear his news. "Dark times in Velanthros," he announced to the crowd, accepting a mug of ale from the tavern keeper. "The kingdom is tearing itself apart." Ivara's hands froze over the herbs she was sorting. She had positioned herself at the edge of the gathering, her cloak pulled low over her face, her pregnant belly hidden beneath layers of wool. "What sort of dark times?" someone asked. The trader took a long drink before answering. "The Alpha King has gone mad. They say he spends every night howling at the moon like a feral beast. His wolves have been sent to every corner of the realm, searching for someone. A woman, though no one knows who she is, or what she has done." Ivara's mark flared with sudden heat. "And the beta?" another villager inquired. "Surely he maintains order while the king is indisposed." The trader laughed bitterly. "The beta is the one causing half the chaos. Corvain has positioned himself as the voice of reason, claiming the king is unfit to rule. He has gathered supporters among the noble houses. There are whispers of a challenge for the throne." The fog seemed to press closer around Ivara, Corvain making a play for power, using Kaelin's desperate search as evidence of instability. And she had handed him the perfect weapon by disappearing. "What of the woman he searches for?" Ivara heard herself ask. "Has no one discovered her identity?" The trader's eyes swept across the gathered villagers, passing over Ivara without recognition. "Some say she was a servant girl who bewitched the king. Others claim she was an assassin sent to poison him." The trader shrugged. "Whatever she was, Corvain has declared her an enemy of the realm. There is a bounty of 15,000 gold pieces for information leading to her capture." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 15,000 gold was more than most villagers would see in 10 lifetimes. Ivara forced her breathing to remain steady, forced her hands to keep sorting herbs as if the conversation meant nothing to her. But inside, her wolf was pacing with growing agitation. He was searching for her. Kaelin had not forgotten, had not moved on. He was tearing his kingdom apart trying to find the woman who had vanished into the night, and Corvain was using that devotion to destroy him. The trader continued with more news: border skirmishes with the southern packs, crops failing in the central provinces, wolves growing restless and violent as their king's instability rippled through the bonds that connected him to his people. An alpha's state of mind affected his entire kingdom. If Kaelin was truly descending into madness, every wolf under his rule would feel the effects, including the twins growing in her womb. Ivara slipped away from the gathering before anyone could notice her distress. She walked into the forest beyond the village, following the narrow path that led to the hot springs where she often came to ease her aching back. But today, she was not alone. A wolf stood among the trees. Massive, gray-furred, its amber eyes fixed on her with an intelligence that was anything but animal. Ivara's heart stopped. They had found her. She turned to run, but her pregnant body was slow and clumsy. Before she had taken 3 steps, more wolves emerged from the undergrowth. 4, 6, 8 of them, forming a circle that cut off every escape route. The gray wolf stepped closer, and Ivara grabbed a fallen branch, brandishing it with desperate futility. "Stay back," she commanded. "I am warning you." The wolf's form began to shimmer. Fur receded into flesh. Bones cracked and reformed. Within moments, a woman stood where the wolf had been, silver-haired and sharp-featured, wrapped in a traveling cloak that had materialized with the shift. "Put down the stick," the woman said dryly. "If we wanted you dead, you would already be bleeding." "Who are you?" Ivara demanded, not lowering her weapon. The woman's eyes dropped to Ivara's belly, and something flickered across her face. Recognition. And beneath it, fierce protectiveness. "My name is Thessaly," the woman said. "I am the king's spy master." And I have spent 2 months tracking you across 3 provinces to deliver a message. From Kalin? From Rorvik, before he was murdered?" Thessaly's voice hardened. "The old advisor discovered the truth about what was done to you and the king. He died getting that information out of the castle. The least you can do is listen to what he sacrificed his life to tell you." Ivara's branch lowered. Rorvik, dead. The man who had saved her life, killed for his loyalty. The wolves around her sat back on their haunches, their posture shifting from threatening to protective. And Thessaly reached into her cloak to withdraw a sealed letter, its edges stained with what looked horrifyingly like dried blood. "Read it," the spy master said. "Then decide if you want to keep running, or if you are ready to fight for what is yours." Ivara's hands trembled as she broke the blood-stained seal. The letter was written in a cramped, urgent hand. Rorvik's hand, she realized, recognizing the precise lettering from documents she had seen in the castle. She read, "My Lady Ivara, if you are reading this, then Thessaly has found you, and I am likely dead. Do not mourn me. I have lived long enough to see 3 kings rise and 2 fall. What matters now is not my fate, but yours and the king's. Everything you believe about yourself is a lie. You are not a seamstress's daughter. Your mother, Elspeth, was once the most powerful oracle in Valanthros, descended from the sacred line of moon-blessed wolves who served as advisors to kings for 12 generations. When she foresaw that her daughter would one day bear the true heirs to the throne, she fled the court and hid among common people to protect you from those who would use or destroy you. The mark on your hip is not merely a birthmark. It is the seal of the Moon Mother, given only to those destined to birth a new royal line. There have been only 4 such seals in recorded history. You carry the 5th. The night of the bonding hall, when the king touched your hand, the seal recognized its counterpart. Kalin carries the king's mark on his shoulder blade. Together, these marks form an unbreakable bond. A true mate bond of the kind that has not occurred in the royal bloodline for 5 generations. This is why Corvain targeted you. He did not spend 3 years seducing you out of attraction or even cruelty. He was tasked with identifying and neutralizing you before you could fulfill your destiny. The noble houses who oppose reform, who profit from the current corruption, who fear what a truly bonded king might accomplish, they have been searching for the moon-sealed woman since Kalin came of age. Corvain was their instrument. His public humiliation of you was designed to break your spirit and drive you away from the court before the king could discover what you were. But Kalin's intervention disrupted their plan. His claiming of you triggered the bond activation, which is why you felt fire at his touch, and why you now carry his children despite never lying with him. Yes, my lady, I know about the twins. The bond tells me, as it tells the king, though he does not understand what he senses. The council's order for your execution was never about justice. It was about preventing the bond from completing. As long as you and Kalin remain separated, the bond stays dormant. The seal's power stays locked, and the corrupt wolves who have controlled Valanthros for decades maintain their grip on the throne. But if you return, if you and the king complete the bond, everything changes. A fully bonded alpha pair cannot be challenged through political maneuvering. The pack bonds would recognize you as true royalty, regardless of your supposed common blood. Corvain and his allies would lose all legal standing to oppose either of you. This is why they want you dead before the bond can strengthen further. Thessaly will tell you more about the specific threats. She has been tracking Corvain's movements and has uncovered evidence of a conspiracy that extends far beyond the Valanthros court. My lady, I served your mother when she was young. I swore to protect her daughter if the day ever came when her identity was revealed. I am sorry I could not do more. I am sorry I could not be there to see you claim your rightful place beside the king. But I die knowing that I gave you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Fight, Ivara. Fight for yourself. Fight for the king who is destroying himself trying to find you. Fight for the children who will change the future of our kingdom. And know that your mother would be proud of the woman you have become. In loyalty and hope, Rorvik. The letter fell from Ivara's numb fingers. Everything she had believed about herself, her humble origins, her powerlessness, her unworthiness, all of it was a carefully constructed lie designed to keep her small and hidden and safe. Her mother had been an oracle, a moon-blessed wolf of sacred lineage, and she, Ivara, was not a nobody at all. She was the woman destined to birth a new royal line. Thessaly watched her with sharp eyes. Now you understand why Corvain fears you. Why the corrupt houses will stop at nothing to prevent your return. Rorvik wrote that you uncovered evidence of a conspiracy. The spy master nodded grimly. Corvain has hired the Black Hollow killers, 6 of the deadliest assassins in the Eastern Territories. They have been tracking you for weeks. She paused. They reached Brindale yesterday. Ivara's blood turned to ice. Yesterday? I intercepted 3 of them on the mountain pass. Thessaly's voice was flat with controlled violence, but 3 more remain. They know you are in this village. They are waiting for darkness to strike. We have to warn Dorwin. Warn the village. The village cannot be saved by warning. You can be saved by leaving. Thessaly gestured to her wolves. We ride within the hour. The king has been tracking you through the bond for days. He is close now, perhaps hours behind us. If we move fast, we can reach his camp before Corvain's assassins reach us. Ivara pressed her hands to her belly. The twins moved restlessly, as if sensing their mother's turmoil. Running again. Always running. Would it ever end? But this time was different. This time, she knew what she was running toward instead of merely running away. And for the first time since that terrible night in the bonding hall, a spark of something other than fear ignited in her chest. Kalen had torn his kingdom apart searching for her. He was half mad with grief, believing she had been taken against her will. Believing he had failed to protect her. She could not let him destroy himself. Could not let Corvain use their separation to seize the throne. Could not let her children be born into a kingdom ruled by the man who had orchestrated their parents' suffering. I will not just survive, Ivara said quietly, and I will not just fight. She looked up at Thessaly with eyes that had begun to glow with faint amber light. I will end this. Before the spy master could respond, a howl split the evening air. Close. Too close. They are here, Thessaly snarled. Move, now. The forest exploded into chaos. The assassins came from the shadows like death given form. Ivara saw the first one materialize between the trees, a figure in black leather with a blade that seemed to drink the fading light. Then another. And another. 3 killers moving with synchronized precision, their faces hidden behind masks of hammered iron. The Black Hollow, Thessaly had called them, the deadliest assassins in the Eastern Territories. And they had come for her. Thessaly shifted instantly, her human form dissolving into the massive gray wolf that had first confronted Ivara. The spy master's pack followed suit, 8 wolves launching themselves toward the attackers with snarls that shook the forest. Run! Thessaly's voice echoed in Ivara's mind. The bond between pack members allowed for mental communication during shift, and apparently the spy master had extended that connection to include her. Get to the horses. Ride west. Do not stop for anything. But Ivara could not move. One of the assassins had broken through the wolf line. He advanced toward her with terrible calm, his blade raised, his iron mask reflecting her terrified face. The seal, she thought desperately. The power Rorvik mentioned. How do I access it? The assassin lunged. Ivara threw up her hands in futile defense, and the world exploded in silver light. The force that erupted from her palms was not something she controlled. It simply happened, as natural as breathing, as inevitable as the tide. A wave of radiant energy slammed into the assassin and hurled him backward into an oak tree with bone-shattering force. He did not rise. Ivara stared at her hands. They were glowing. Faint lines of silver traced across her skin, forming patterns she did not recognize, but somehow understood. The seal of the Moon Mother was awakening. More, her wolf whispered. There is more. Use it. A second assassin had cut down two of Thessaly's wolves and was advancing through their fallen bodies. His blade dripped crimson. His mask showed no emotion. Ivara reached for the power again. This time, it came easier. Silver fire gathered between her palms, swirling like captured moonlight. She thrust her hands forward, and a bolt of pure energy streaked across the clearing. The assassin dodged, impossibly fast, the bolt scorching past his shoulder. He kept coming. Ivara backed away, her power flickering. The brief explosion of magic had cost her more than she realized. Her vision was swimming. Her legs were trembling. The twins were moving frantically inside her, as if they could sense their mother's fading strength. The assassin raised his blade for the killing stroke. A roar split the night. Something massive crashed through the tree line with the force of a landslide. Ivara caught a glimpse of black fur, of golden eyes blazing like twin suns, of jaws that closed around the assassin's torso and shook him like a child's doll. The third assassin turned to face this new threat. He lasted approximately 2 seconds. Kalen's wolf form was nothing like the creatures Thessaly commanded. He was larger than any wolf Ivara had ever seen, a monster of shadow and muscle that moved with devastating precision. The assassin's blade found only air. The Alpha King's fangs found flesh and bone. When it was over, Kalen stood in a clearing painted with blood. He turned toward Ivara, and even in wolf form, she could see the desperation in his golden eyes. The fear. The overwhelming relief at finally finding what he had been searching for. He shifted. One moment, a wolf. The next, a man. He was thinner than she remembered. Exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his cheekbones stood out sharply beneath skin that had seen too little sun and too much grief. But he was still Kalen. Still the king who had claimed her before his entire court. Still the man whose touch had ignited something ancient in her soul. Ivara, he breathed. Her name sounded like a prayer on his lips. She wanted to run to him, wanted to throw herself into his arms and feel the bond surge between them, but her strength was gone. The power she had unleashed had drained everything she had. The world tilted sideways. Kalen caught her before she hit the ground. I have you, he murmured against her hair. I have you. You are safe now. I am never letting you go again. His hand found her belly, and he went completely still. The twins kicked against his palm. Ivara watched his face as understanding dawned. Watched shock give way to wonder, then to fierce protective fury. Mine, his wolf growled through his human throat. They are mine. Ours, Ivara corrected weakly. And then she lost consciousness in his arms. Ivara woke in a tent that smelled of canvas and pine. She was lying on a pile of furs, her body warm despite the mountain chill. Someone had removed her cloak and boots and wrapped her in a wool blanket soft as clouds, and someone was watching her. Kalen sat on a camp stool beside her makeshift bed, his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin tingle. How long? She asked. Her voice was hoarse. 6 hours. He did not look away. Thessaly says you nearly killed yourself using power you have not been trained to wield. She says it is a miracle the twins survived the strain. Ivara's hand flew to her belly. The twins. Are they? They are strong. Kalen's voice softened almost imperceptibly. I can feel them through the bond. 2 heartbeats alongside yours, steady as drums. Relief flooded through her. She closed her eyes, letting the knowledge settle into her bones. When she opened them again, Kaylin's expression had hardened. Why did you run? The question hung between them like a blade. Because I was told I would be executed at dawn. Ivara pushed herself into a sitting position despite her body's protests. Because the council declared me a threat. Because I had no pack, no power, no way to defend myself against wolves who wanted me dead. You had me. The words were sharp with something that sounded almost like hurt. You were surrounded by your council, she shot back. Being told that I had enchanted you, being convinced that your judgment was compromised. What was I supposed to do, Kaylin? Knock on the council chamber door and ask them to please stop planning my execution? You were supposed to trust that I would protect you. Trust. Ivara's voice rose with months of suppressed anguish. I spent 3 years trusting a man who stood before your entire court and called me common filth. 3 years believing his promises while he used me as a pawn in some political game I did not even know existed. Forgive me if trust does not come easily anymore. Kaylin flinched. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Kaylin rose from his stool and crossed to sit beside her on the furs. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that the mark on her hip began to pulse with warmth. I have not slept in 2 months, he said quietly. My wolf refuses to rest while you are missing. I have destroyed alliances that took years to build, because I could not focus on anything except finding you. Corvain has turned half the noble houses against me, and I did not care. The crops are failing, the borders are weakening, and I let it all burn because nothing mattered except you. He turned to look at her, and she saw the wolf burning behind his human eyes. Do you understand what that means, Ivara? I am the Alpha King. The welfare of thousands depends on my stability. And I threw it all away for a woman I touched once. A woman who vanished without a word. A woman who left me howling at the moon like a beast while she hid in a mountain village and told no one where she had gone. I did not know, Ivara whispered. I did not know you were searching. I did not know what I was to you. You felt the bond ignite. You felt what passed between us in that hall. I felt something I did not understand. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. You claimed me to save me from humiliation. I thought you were being kind. I did not know. I could not have known that it meant something more. Kaylin's hand came up to cup her face. His touch was gentle despite the roughness of his palm. It meant everything, he said. You are my true mate, Ivara, the other half of my soul. I have waited 32 years to find you, and when I finally did, you were ripped away before I could even explain what you were to me. A tear escaped down her cheek. He wiped it away with his thumb. I read Rorvik's letter, she admitted. I know what I am now, what my mother was, what the seal means. Then you know that we are bound by something older than kingdoms. Kaylin pressed his forehead to hers. You know that these children you carry are not accidents, but prophecy. You know that together, we can reshape Volanthros into something worthy of their inheritance. Ivara's breath caught. Together. If you will have me. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. If you can forgive me for failing to protect you that night. If you can trust me to do better. She pulled back to look at him. This proud, powerful king, humbling himself before her. Asking for her forgiveness when she was the one who had run. You did not fail me, she said. You saved me from the worst moment of my life. You gave me dignity when Corvain tried to strip it away. You claimed me before your entire kingdom without hesitation, and then I let you be driven out alone into the night. You did not let anything. Your council acted without your knowledge. Rorvik acted to save my life. She placed her hand over his heart. You have spent 2 months destroying yourself trying to find me. How could I not forgive that? Kaylin made a sound that was half sob, half growl. He pulled her into his arms with desperate gentleness, mindful of her belly, and buried his face in her hair. Never again, he swore. Whatever comes next, we face it together. I will not let them separate us again. Ivara clung to him, feeling the bond pulse between them with growing strength. The seal on her hip resonated with something on his skin, two halves of an ancient pattern reaching toward completion. There is still Corvain, she murmured against his chest. He has taken your throne, then we take it back. Kaelin's arms tightened around her. And when we do, he will answer for every crime he has committed. Against you, against me, against the kingdom he has torn apart with his ambition. Ivara pulled back to meet his eyes. Promise me something. Anything. When we face him, let me be the one to end it. She saw surprise flicker across his features. He spent 3 years manipulating me. 3 years making me believe I was worthless, making me grateful for crumbs of affection, using my loneliness as a weapon against me. I need to be the one who shows him how wrong he was. Kaelin studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. When the time comes, he said, I will give you that chance. They rode west through the mountain passes with 200 of Kaelin's most loyal wolves. The journey that should have taken 3 days took 5. Ivara's pregnancy made hard riding impossible, and Kaelin refused to push her despite his obvious urgency to reclaim his throne. Each night, they made camp in sheltered valleys, and each night, Kaelin held her while they slept. He did not try to complete the bond. Not yet. The conditions were not right, he explained. A true mate bond deserved more than a hasty consummation in a military tent. It deserved ceremony, witnesses, the proper honoring of something sacred. But they talked. For hours, for entire nights, they shared the pieces of themselves that had been hidden. Kaelin told her about his father, a stern alpha who had ruled through fear rather than loyalty. About his mother, the last true mated queen, who had died when he was young and left him with only fragmented memories of warmth. About the loneliness of being king, surrounded by sycophants and schemers, never knowing who to trust. Ivara told him about growing up believing she was ordinary, about her mother's secrets, the way she had always sensed there was something being kept from her, about Corvain, how he had seemed so kind at first, how skillfully he had isolated her from everyone who might have questioned his intentions. He made me believe I was lucky that he wanted me, she admitted one night. That a beta paying attention to a packless nobody was a gift I should treasure. I was so grateful that I did not see the cage he was building around me. Kaelin's jaw tightened. He will pay for that. For all of it. On the 4th night, they made camp within sight of the Velantros Valley. The capital city glittered in the distance, its towers catching the moonlight. But the royal banner that should have flown above the castle was gone, replaced by Corvain's personal standard. He has declared himself regent, Thessaly reported grimly. Claims the king died during his mad search for the enchantress. Half the noble houses have accepted his authority. The other half are waiting to see who wins before they commit. And my wolves? Kaelin demanded. The ones who were loyal? Imprisoned? Or fled to the eastern provinces? Thessaly's expression darkened. Corvain has been thorough. He spent months positioning his supporters while you were distracted. The moment you left the capital to search for Ivara, he sprung his trap. Ivara watched Kaelin absorb this news. Watched the fury build behind his controlled expression. He used me to bait you, she said quietly. Drove me away knowing you would follow. Everything that has happened was designed to separate you from your power base. And it worked. Kaelin's voice was bitter. I played directly into his hands. So we changed the game. Ivara moved to stand beside him, looking out at the city that should have been his. We stop playing defense. We stop reacting to his moves. We do something he does not expect. And what would that be? Ivara felt the seal pulse on her hip. The power she had unleashed in the forest was still there, waiting. Stronger now, perhaps, after days of rest and the nearness of her mate. He expects you to attack the city, she said, to challenge him through force. Instead, we challenge him through law. Kaelin turned to look at her. The bonding hall, Ivara continued. You claim me there before 500 witnesses. That claim was never formally dissolved. Which means, legally, I am still under your protection. And any action Corvain took against me was an action against the crown. Thessaly's eyes widened. She is right. The spymaster stepped forward. If we can prove Corvain orchestrated your exile, if we can demonstrate that his coup was built on crimes against the king's claimed mate, the noble houses would have to reconsider their support. Kaelin finished. He cannot claim to be a legitimate ruler if he achieved power through treason against the royal bond. We still need proof, Ivara said. Something more than Rorvik's letter. I can provide that. Thessaly's smile was sharp as a blade. Corvain has been careless in his triumph. He keeps records, documents, evidence of every bribe, every threat, and every alliance built on corruption. I know where he stores them. Then we retrieve them. Kaelin's entire bearing had changed, despair giving way to determined focus. We present the evidence to the assembled houses, and we force Corvain to answer for his crimes publicly. He will not surrender quietly, Thessaly warned. Then, he will not surrender at all. Kaelin looked at Ivara, and something passed between them through the bond. Understanding. Partnership. The beginning of the true mate synchronization that would eventually make them unstoppable. He turned back to his spymaster. We move at dawn. They did not attack the city. Instead, Ivara walked through the gates alone. The plan was Thessaly's, refined through hours of argument. Corvain was expecting Kaelin to launch a military assault. He had prepared for it, positioning his forces along the walls and at every strategic choke point. But he was not expecting the woman he thought dead to simply stroll into the capital in broad daylight. Ivara wore a gown of silver and white, the colors of the moon-blessed bloodline she had only recently learned she possessed. Her pregnant belly was visible to all, impossible to hide and impossible to ignore. The seal of the Moon Mother had been painted on her forehead in ceremonial ink, marking her as something more than a simple seamstress's daughter. She looked like a queen. And she walked toward the great hall where Corvain held court as if she owned every stone beneath her feet. The whispers began almost immediately. She lives, the enchantress. But look at her belly. Whose children does she carry? Ivara ignored them all. She walked with her chin high and her eyes forward, letting the mark on her hip guide her. Kaelin was close. She could feel him through the bond, his presence a warm reassurance pulsing against her consciousness. Trust the plan, he had said that morning. Draw Corvain out. Make him commit to a public confrontation. Thessaly will do the rest. And then we finish this. Together. The guards at the great hall doors moved to stop her. Ivara simply looked at them, and something in her gaze made them hesitate. I am Ivara, of the moon-blessed line, she announced, her voice carried across the crowded courtyard with unnatural clarity. I am the claimed mate of Kaelin, true Alpha King of Velenthros. I am here to answer the charges brought against me by the one who calls himself Regent. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Before they could decide what to do, the doors swung open from within. Corvain stood on the threshold, his handsome face arranged in an expression of surprised welcome that did not reach his eyes. Ivara, he said smoothly, what a pleasant surprise. We all thought you were dead. Sorry to disappoint. She did not flinch as she walked past him into the hall. Did not show fear as she felt his gaze rake across her pregnant form. Did not give him the satisfaction of seeing how much his presence still made her skin crawl. The great hall was filled with nobles, the same nobles who had laughed when Corvain humiliated her 4 months ago. The same nobles who had watched the Alpha King claim her and done nothing when the council ordered her execution. Now they stared at her with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and something that might have been shame. "I have come to demand justice," Ivara announced. Her voice rang through the chamber. "I have come to present evidence that the man who calls himself regent achieved his position through treason, attempted murder, and systematic manipulation of the crown." Corvain laughed. "Evidence? What evidence could a pack less nobody possibly possess?" Ivara smiled. "The evidence your predecessor died to protect. The evidence your assassins failed to prevent me from receiving. The evidence that proves you spent 3 years infiltrating the court, corrupting officials, and positioning yourself to steal a throne that was never meant to be yours." She reached into her gown and withdrew a sheaf of documents. Thessaly had obtained them from Corvain's private study just hours ago, while the false regent was distracted by reports of Kaelin's army gathering in the mountains. "Letters," Ivara continued, "in your own hand, detailing bribes paid to council members, instructions to your family's agents regarding the isolation and manipulation of the woman bearing the moon seal, orders to corrupt council members into declaring her a threat, and most damning of all, the contract with the Black Hollow assassins to eliminate me before the bond could complete." The nobles began to murmur. Corvain's smile had frozen on his face. "You cannot prove any of this," he said. "Those documents are forgeries. Everyone knows you are an enchantress. You have probably fabricated evidence to frame an innocent man. Then let the assembled houses examine them." Ivara held the documents high. "Let them verify the handwriting, the seals, and the specifics that only you would know. If I am lying, you have nothing to fear." For a long moment, Corvain said nothing. Then his expression shifted. The mask of pleasant welcome fell away, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "You should have stayed hidden, little seamstress," he said quietly. "You should have taken your brats and disappeared into whatever mountain village was sheltering you. Now you have forced my hand." He raised his arm. Armed men poured from the side chambers. Not wolves, Ivara realized with growing dread. Humans, mercenaries, dozens of them, their blades drawn, and their eyes empty of anything resembling mercy. Corvain did not trust his own wolves enough to order the execution of their king's mate, so he had hired outside killers instead. "You see," Corvain announced to the horrified nobles, "how dangerous this woman truly is. She comes into our hall with forged documents and wild accusations, attempting to destabilize the kingdom further. I have no choice but to protect Valenthros from her treachery." The mercenaries advanced. Ivara stood her ground. "Before you kill me," she said calmly, "there is something I should tell you." "And what is that?" "I love him." The words filled the hall. Simple, true, undeniable. "I love the man you tried to destroy," Ivara continued. "I love the king you manipulated and drove to madness. I love the father of these children I carry. And I wanted you to hear me say it before what comes next." Corvain's brow furrowed. Before what comes next? The walls of the great hall exploded. Wolves poured through the shattered stone like a tidal wave of fur and fury. Kaelin's loyalists, hidden in the city for weeks, had been waiting for Ivara's signal. Her declaration of love, spoken aloud where every wolf in the kingdom could feel it through the pack bonds, had been the trigger. Now chaos consumed the great hall. Mercenaries fell beneath snapping jaws. Corvain's supporters scrambled for escape routes. The noble witnesses pressed themselves against walls, too terrified to flee, too transfixed to look away. And in the center of it all, Corvain seized Ivara. His arm locked around her throat. A blade appeared at her belly, its silver edge gleaming with lethal promise. "Enough," he roared. The fighting stopped. Kaelin stood 20 feet away, his chest heaving, and blood matting his dark hair. His shift had been interrupted mid-transformation, leaving him caught between forms, claws extending from his fingers, fangs distorting his mouth. Let her go. His voice was barely human. One more step, and I open her from navel to throat. Corvain's blade pressed harder against Ivara's dress. I felt those brats kick when I grabbed her, Kaelin. Twin heirs. Your legacy. Do you really want to watch them spill onto this floor? A snarl tore from Kaelin's throat. Around him, his wolves trembled with the effort of holding back. Ivara felt the bond pulsing between her and her mate. His terror, his fury, his desperate need to reach her tempered by the knowledge that any move could trigger the blade. Call off your wolves, Corvain commanded. Order them to stand down. Let me walk out of this hall with the girl, and perhaps I will let her live long enough to deliver those heirs. Never. The word came from Ivara, not Kaelin. Corvain's grip tightened. You do not get a vote, seamstress. You keep calling me that. Ivara felt the seal on her hip blazing with heat, as if my mother's profession defines what I am, as if 3 years of your manipulation erased my true nature. The silver light began at her fingertips. What are you doing? Corvain's voice pitched upward with sudden fear. Stop that. Whatever you are doing, stop it now. You wanted to know what I am. Ivara's voice resonated with harmonic depth. Let me show you. The transformation came not in a rush, but in a wave. It was nothing like the partial, desperate shift she had experienced in the forest. This was complete, controlled. The seal of the Moon Mother fully awakening, unlocking the heritage that had been hidden in her blood for 23 years. Fur rippled across her skin. Bones flowed like water. The dress Corvain gripped dissolved into silver light as her body reformed itself into something magnificent. Corvain stumbled backward, his blade slashing empty air where her throat had been. Where Ivara had stood, a wolf now crouched. Her fur was white as winter snow, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed with ancient power. Her eyes blazed like captured moons. And despite the transformation, her belly still swelled with the twins who had somehow survived the shift. A wolf pregnant in both forms. Something that had not occurred in recorded history. The nobles gasped. The mercenaries fled. Even Kaelin's loyalists drew back in instinctive awe. Only Corvain remained in place, his blade trembling in his grip. Impossible, he whispered. No common-born wolf could ever. He never finished the sentence. Ivara lunged. She was not a trained fighter. She had no experience with combat in wolf form. But the seal guided her movements with instinct older than memory, and her jaws found Corvain's sword arm with devastating precision. He screamed as the blade clattered to the floor. Ivara shifted back to human form, standing over him as he clutched his mangled arm. She was naked, covered in blood, her pregnant belly rising and falling with each breath. But she had never felt more powerful. You spent 3 years making me feel worthless, she said quietly. 3 years convincing me that I should be grateful for your attention. 3 years using my loneliness as a weapon to control me. She knelt beside him, her moon-bright eyes boring into his. You chose the wrong woman to underestimate. Ivara, Kaelin's voice came from behind her. He approached slowly, his claws retracting, his features returning to human. This is your kill. But if you cannot... She shook her head. I can. Her hand closed around the silver blade Corvain had dropped. The man who had tormented her looked up with eyes that finally showed real fear. Please, he gasped. Ivara, we had something once. You loved me. I loved who I thought you were. She pressed the blade to his throat. I execute who you actually are. The cut was clean. Corvain's body slumped to the stone floor, and the great hall fell silent. Ivara rose to face the assembled nobles. Blood dripped from the blade in her hand. Blood stained her skin, her hair, her face. But when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of queens. The false regent is dead, she announced. The true king lives, and I am his mate. She turned to look at Kaelin. He was staring at her with an expression she had never seen before. Wonder, pride, and love so vast it seemed to fill the entire hall. He crossed to her in 3 strides, removing his cloak and wrapping it around her naked shoulders. Then, before the entire court, he knelt. "My queen," he said. One by one, the wolves of Valanthros followed their king to the floor. The bonding ceremony took place 3 days later. Not in the great hall where Corvain had died, but in the ancient grove beyond the city walls where the first wolves of Valanthros had pledged themselves to each other thousands of years ago. Moon-white flowers bloomed among the roots of trees older than the kingdom itself, and the stars above seemed to burn brighter than they had in living memory. Ivara stood before the gathered packs wearing a gown of silver and midnight blue. The seal of the Moon Mother glowed softly on her hip, visible through the sheer fabric, marking her as what she truly was. Kaelin faced her in ceremonial black, the king's mark on his shoulder blade pulsing with answering light. His amber eyes had not left her face since she emerged from her preparations. The High Elder, a different one than the wolf who had presided over Corvain's cruelty, raised her hands for silence. "We gather beneath the watching moon to witness what fate has already decreed." Ivara of the moon-blessed line and Kaelan, Alpha King of Valanthros, recognized each other as true mates from the moment of first touch. Tonight, we make formal what their souls have always known. The ceremony was ancient, sacred. Words spoken in the old tongue, blessings invoked from the moon herself, promises exchanged that would bind them not just for this lifetime, but for every lifetime that followed. And when the moment came, Kaelin bared his throat to her without hesitation. "Claim me," he said. "Complete what began in the bonding hall." Ivara placed her lips against his skin. She could feel his pulse thundering beneath her mouth, his entire body trembling with anticipation. Her teeth sank into his flesh. The bond exploded between them like the birth of a star. Every barrier dissolved. Every secret was laid bare. Ivara felt Kaelin's memories flooding into her, his childhood loneliness, his desperate hope when he first touched her hand, his anguish during the months of separation, his overwhelming love in this moment of completion. And she knew he felt hers in return. When she pulled back, silver light was pouring from them both. The assembled wolves watched in awe as the 2 marks, the seal of the Moon Mother and the King's mark, aligned across the distance between their bodies. The patterns merged into something new. A single emblem, half moon and half wolf, blazing on both their bodies. The bond was complete. Kaelin pulled her into his arms and kissed her before the moon and the stars and every wolf in Valanthros. The cheers that erupted shook the ancient grove to its roots. 2 months later, in chambers that had once belonged to a queen, Ivara brought her children into the world. The birth was difficult. Twins always were, Dorwin had warned, and these were no ordinary twins. The power that had manifested during their mother's pregnancy continued to pulse through them, making them stronger and more demanding than normal newborns. But when it was over, when the midwives had cleaned and swaddled both infants, Kaelin entered the chamber to find Ivara holding a son in one arm and a daughter in the other. The boy had his father's dark hair and his mother's moon-bright eyes. The girl had silver hair like her grandmother and amber eyes like her father's wolf. Both bore marks. The son carried the king's mark on his tiny shoulder blade. The daughter bore the seal of the Moon Mother on her hip. For the first time in 5 generations, the royal bloodline had produced true heirs. Kaelin sank onto the bed beside his mate, one hand reaching out to touch each child in turn. Through the bond, Ivara felt his overwhelming emotion, joy and terror, and protectiveness and wonder all tangled together. "They are perfect," he whispered. "They are ours." Ivara looked down at the faces of her children. 4 months ago, she had been a seamstress's daughter with no pack and no prospects, standing exposed before a jeering crowd while a man she trusted tore her dignity to shreds. Now she was a queen, A true mate, a mother, and the man who had mocked her, who had used her, who had tried to steal everything from her and her king, was nothing but a grave marker in the traitor's field. "What are you thinking?" Kaelin asked softly. Ivara smiled. "I am thinking," she said, "and that I stood in that hall 4 months ago believing I was worthless, believing that Corvain's cruelty proved what I had always feared about myself. And then you stepped down from that dais and changed everything. I only saw what was already true." Kaelin pressed a kiss to her temple. "You were never worthless, Ivara. You were hidden. And now the whole kingdom sees what I saw from the beginning." The daughter stirred in Ivara's arm, making a small sound of complaint. "She is hungry," Ivara said, like her father, always demanding. Kaelin laughed, and the sound filled the chamber with warmth. Outside their window, the wolves of Velanthros lifted their voices in celebration. The howls carried across the kingdom, spreading the news that the true royal line had been secured, that the dark days were over, that a new chapter was beginning. Ivara leaned her head against Kaelin's shoulder as their children nursed, feeling the bond pulse between them with steady certainty. 4 months ago, a beta had mocked her while rejecting her before the entire court. Now, an Alpha King held her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Some endings, she thought, are really just beginnings in disguise. And this was only the first chapter of Forever. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.